hard to see when it's only on your TV or 20 miles across town, where we're all living so good that we moved out of Jesus' neighborhood, where he's hungry and not feeling so good from going through our trash. He says more than just your cash and coin. I want your time, I want your voice, I want the things you just can't give me. So what must we do? Here in the West we wanna follow you. We speak the language and we keep all the rules, even a few we made up. Come on and follow me. Let's sell your house, sell your SUV, sell your stock, sell your security, and give it to the poor. Well, what is this? Hey, what's the deal? I don't sleep around and I don't steal, but I want the things you just can't give me. I want the things you just can't give me. Because of what you do to the least of these, my brothers, you have done it to me. Cause I want the things you just can't give me. I want the things you just can't give me.
All right. Howdy. So, fair warning, this might have religious content in it. So just be aware. I talk about all sorts of things. And one of the things I used to do is I used to work in ministry. So I'm very interested in the religious world. And I guess you would say I'm deconstructed. I might be a very, very liberal Christian and progressive Christian, or I might be a headed toward deism. I'm sort of on that weird borderline cusp. But one thing I do know is I know the Bible pretty well, and I know it through different lenses. So I know it from a Baptist lens. I know it from a Methodist lens. I know it from a Catholic lens. I know it from an Eastern Orthodox lens. I am fascinated by the different interpretations on many different subjects of Christianity, and I just eat it up. Nom, 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 nom. I'm a theology nerd, and I still haven't stopped being one. I think it's interesting. I also think other religions are interesting, and I'm absolutely fascinated by cults. Really fascinated by cults. And so I could go on and about that too. So I will always sort of circle back to these subjects. I know that that's not for everyone. But that being said, I am used to sparring ideas, and YouTube is, if anything, a marketplace of ideas. And so if you're comfortable with your own ideas and where you stand, or you're comfortable exploring your own self and being introspective and shining a light and examining your life and your compass and how you look at things, awesome. I am always looking at my compass and looking at things and going, what is truth and where does it align? with where I'm at. And so I'm always open to kind of looking at those sort of things. But right now, I'm going to focus on a pastor named Mark Driscoll. My personal feelings about Mark Driscoll are quite negative. Mark Driscoll was definitely a pastor who was in a cult of personality. He was in a huge megachurch running a church called Mars Hill, and he had quite a rise and fall in Mars Hill. He was a charismatic. I don't find him very charismatic myself, but a lot of people that are looking for a man's man, and somebody that's anti-woke, somebody that'll drink whiskey from the pulpit, somebody that'll talk about sex and sodomy and be like okay with it if it's long as it's in your bedroom, because Song of Solomon, he is your guy. And so a lot of guys really love Mark Driscoll. He is definitely rough around the edges, and he is actually, as much as people go, oh, well, he flaunts sexuality and he's this and he drinks whiskey. Oh my gosh. He's so liberal in that way. But overall, Mark Driscoll's incredibly conservative. He's almost fundamentalist in most ways. So a gag me with a spoon. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Mark Driscoll. But one of the things that I think that why people liked Mark Driscoll, he does have a sense of humor, and he has that masculine man's man persona. And guys on that libertarian men's rights spectrum, they dig it. They dig it. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, okay, I don't get it. I think it's kind of gross. I think he's misogynistic as all get out. And over and over again, his misogyny just sticks out to me almost more than anything. Like it just drives me nuts. But one of the things that really shot him down was how abusive he was. So people that worked with Mark Driscoll, I think like 2014, 2015 era in Mars Hill, they had this really big mega church with a lot of personality. I guess we call it a cult of personality sort of situation. And a lot of the big mega churches, that's the case. I mean, I don't like Joel Osteen, but he has a cult of personality. I don't like in San Diego, I don't particularly like Miles McPherson. In San Diego has a very large church called The Rock. And The Rock has Miles McPherson as lead, and he's an ex-Charger. And so he's really been hanging on that ex-Charger thing. So, but there are people that really like Miles McPherson. So some of these mega churches are really into, I guess what you say, a cult of personality. And so there's several churches like this. John MacArthur's church, I would say, like that. John Piper has a cult of personality. Driscoll has a cult of personality. Greg Locke, I hate him. He has a cult of personality. There's all sorts of people that just are, whatever reason, I don't find them particularly charismatic, but people are drawn into these sort of situations. So one of the things I've noticed with Mark Driscoll is he really attracts libertarians. So if you are of the libertarian bent, if you're from states like Ohio and you're purple, and you might like Mark Driscoll. And so Mark Driscoll found home in Arizona. Actually, that's not, he had the fall of Mars Church. People wouldn't touch him with a pole for a long time. He was known as being incredibly toxic to work with. His staff in Mars Hill said that he was abusive and toxic and invasive. And they had a lot of complaints about him in that way. Well, apparently people have short memories. You know how it is in Christianity. And all you have to do is say, Jesus forgave me and God told me this. And then voila, you can be a pastor again. And so he's pastoring a church in Arizona. And so Arizona tends to also attract a lot of libertarians. And I love you, neighbor state, Arizona, but and so he's over there. So I'm taking a drink because Lord knows I talk for a living and I talked all day. So he's risen again, and he's a pastor once again, which is interesting to me because I really thought once he was outed for being the abusive jerk that he was, and people who were of the conservative side of things were like, he's actually quite a jerk, that he was sort of done for, but he reemerged, man, like a phoenix in Arizona. Just kidding. So yeah, so here we are again. He needs to team up with Steven Anderson. Well, he's not as bad as Steven Anderson, but he's really, yeah, he's one of those, like, not as obvious as Steven Anderson and Greg Locke, but he might hold you down while they beat you, like, kind of thing. Like, that's kind of where he's at. So, yeah, you can like, subscribe, share, if you'd like. You can have differing opinions. We're not going to whack you down for having a different opinion here. It's okay to disagree. You can call me demonic if you want. I'm told that all the time. It's awesome. So anytime I step on conservative Christians' toes, I'm usually used to that. Heretic, all that stuff. I've been called Robin Bell, which I said, thank you. That's really complimentary. I like Rob Bell. So anyway, the song that I played you was actually from Derek Webb, and I always like Derek Webb. He's outspoken. He's different. And I like that I Want the Things That You Can't Give Me song, because it's like, it talks about like how, the idea of selling your possessions and giving all that you have to the poor. Like, oh, wait a minute, can't do that. And so, like, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's like a big part in Christianity, yet like American evangelicals don't really like that part. So I think it's interesting. So a while ago, I had a surgery, and I had just kind of some, I guess, background. I've been very aware of Mark Driscoll, and I've been very aware of progressive Christians' criticisms of Mark Driscoll, and conservative Christians' criticism of Mark Driscoll as well. And I have my own feelings about Mark Driscoll. And it's one of those things where sometimes it's sort of out of sight, out of mind. And what's funny is I had a falling out with the unifam, right? And it was really interesting how the Christianity got turned up suddenly by unirach. And I found that fascinating. And I found that unirach and Janie both did that. And I call it using the God card. God is on my side. Who's to argue with the God card? You can't argue with it, right? It's impossible. Like, if someone says God told me, how do you argue with that, right? Like, okay, like, is that a disprovable thing? Like, they're arguing from the ultimate authority suddenly. Okay, well, this is YouTube drama. I don't think the creator, sustainer of all things by the Christian, general standard, is going to care about whether there's a falling out on the unifam. But here we go. Fanto says, where does it go? Woke is real. It's horrible, but I got to say, some of these anti-wokers aren't any better. It seems like it goes to a total division. Okay. Mark Driscoll, out of sight, out of mind, and then, the falling out with the unifam, and suddenly, like unirach became evangelical evangelist, and it was really interesting to see this sort of happen. And I know that, like, they had been attending a church or whatever, so the church seems to have made certain requirements of them, and certain behavior modifications happened. And so I thought that was really interesting. With that, there was this use of this clip, and I found it just interesting. It was interesting to pick out. You could have picked like every pastor. Like, there's so many different pastors that you could pick, but you picked Mark Driscoll, and so that got my attention. Sally has a lot to say to her neighbors who are thumping very loud, and she's mad about it. So one second. Yeah. So she's overly vocal sometimes about this time. So this might be a hard one, a hard time slot to to go with, but here we go. Now you know the truth. Half of the reason why I don't stream anymore is Sally. It's just too hard to contend with her barkiness. But anyway, this is Clips for the Soul. Clips for the Soul from Unirach. So Unirach suddenly cares about the soul. So sure, let's watch.
There are some people that are bad. Some people are broken.
Define bad and broken.
She's broken.
She's crying.
She's a sinner, to be sure, but she's not a bad woman. She's a broken woman. So God doesn't argue with her or rebuke her, and neither does the man of God. They serve her and they bless her. Proverbs 19:11, one translation says, if you are sensible, you'll control your temper. When someone wrongs you, it's a great virtue to ignore it. Just going to forgive you, put grace on it, let it go. You've got a storm in your life. I'll be the lightning rod and just ground out your storm. Another one, 1 Corinthians 13:5 says in one translation, love is not irritable or touchy. It does not hold grudges and will hardly even notice when others do it wrong.
Okay. So, you know, that sounds very generic Christian, right? You know, except I think certain people are drawn to certain pastors for certain reasons. And I think he is like definitely libertarian, misogyny land pastor. And so I got a clip for you to watch. I think it's interesting here. So Mark Driscoll is doing a Q&A with his wife, Grace. And the question is asked, can a wife be independent, and how do you lead an independent life? Now, I must remind you, Mark Driscoll's view of a man and a woman's relationship is that the man is the head of the house and the woman needs to be subservient to the man. And so the idea or thought process is what I would think they would officially call complementarianism. So you'll find that there's a lot of Christians that believe in egalitarianism, which is that God made man and women equal, and they can, you know, have equal partnership and relationship and the things that they do. But complementarianism is that the man is the head of the household and the women falls under his authority and leadership. And so that's what he is. So it's interesting to watch a woman have this discussion with him because it kind of makes me go, ugh.
It is. How do I lead an extremely independent wife?
Oh, well, that's dangerous. You can have it. That's great. That's great.
You actually can't lead an independent wife. The wife needs to not be independent.
Oh my gosh, how long have I been muted? Seriously. Like, oh my gosh, I really need to be careful with that. So it's because I muted a different way. I usually mute with the light flashing on my mic, but then it goes a popping noise. So now I'm trying to mute manually here on the screen, but it doesn't like flash to me that I'm muted. So my bad. So the question was, how do you lead an independent wife? It's going with the premise already that the man is the head of this relationship and he is leading his wife and he's the head of the household. So it's already agreeing with that premise, which is complementarianism. And so the key words are independent and leadership, right? So the first thing that pops out of her mouth is you can't be an independent wife. Interesting.
Definition of independent is
Oh, you did homework.
not depending on another's authority. So unfortunately, if she's independent, which is different than strong, and we'll talk about that, she might be independent from God too.
What? So if a woman is independent, she might be independent from God too. Well, okay. I would not grant that in a conversation with somebody. If we're talking about religion, that's not necessarily true. But okay. Like most progressive Christians, or even moderate Christians, or egalitarian Christians would say that they're not independent of God. No one would ever, like those Christians would not say they're independent of God. Most people would say like you're some sort of subjective to his authority or his plans or whatever. So like that doesn't follow through. So that's a big, huge assumption. Again, though, these people can't see out of their theological lens. So
that would be the deeper issue. So oftentimes women that are independent are honestly, there's a lot of insecurities. And so
if a woman is independent, it must mean that you're insecure. Okay. It must mean that.
a self-protection mode.
So maybe they've been hurt or been abused by authority.
If you're independent, you must have been abused. Okay.
Or someone in authority was just not life-giving and caused a lot of harm.
Yeah, it could be her scenario. She could have a father wound that she's putting onto
You have daddy issues, so that's why you're independent.
the Heavenly Father and onto her husband. There's a lot of reasons why women get independent. There could be fears, and so she turns into a controlling person and an independent person. I don't want to be independent at all from the Lord or from you. It's not a safe place for me emotionally, spiritually, physically. And I've had to learn that the hard way in some different areas, but
she looks really tense, actually. She does not look relaxed in the situation here. People's dictionary are broken, not the women.
Strength is good. As a woman, we need to be strong women. We need to have strong convictions, a strong relationship with the Lord. We need to be able to speak truth into people's lives. We need to be strong prayer warriors. Strength is a good thing. And we've raised our girls to be strong girls. But when it's independent, that's different because it's separate from it. Standing alone, wanting to do life my way. I'm going to handle this. And that's not a safe place to be because the Lord asks us to be connected to the vine. And if we're not connected to him, we're truly in danger.
So do you see the jump that she makes? She makes this jump of like, well, Christians, if you are not dependent upon your husband the way I'm dependent on your husband and you're independent, not only do you have daddy issues or you might have been abused or something, but also you're not willing to be dependent on God. You don't really trust him. You're not really connected with him. I mean, if you say that you're not connected to the vine, you're saying that you're not actually a Christian. I mean, that's really how far she's going. Isn't that interesting? Ox says, when someone pulls the God card, I flip them off. Fair enough. We need strong followers. Yeah, strong women who are not independent, apparently. When I think of independence, I think of somebody that's self-sufficient. Should a man leave you or let you down, you're able to be self-sufficient. You're not dependent on him. Unfortunately, most women, even if they're strong-minded, because of like life situations, they can become very dependent on their husbands, especially if they come from religious backgrounds, because at some point they might actually have been complementarians. And so life sometimes changes and people grow, but it's still very common for women to end up dependent on their husbands because, well, a lot of women raise kids and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be that way, but it is oftentimes. And so, there's that. But independence isn't a bad thing. Independence is being strong in your own right and having your own independence and not needing somebody to fulfill it. So fulfill your emotional needs or needing somebody to fulfill you, to make you whole as a person and relying on them too much. So it's kind of interesting that she scoffs at the word independence because I just think it's an odd word to pick on.
Well, and the Bible says the marriages were two become one. And in our culture, we've sort of created this other option where it's like two train tracks. And we talked about it previously, but even there's a trend of they call it living alone together. You have your house, I have my house. You have your job, I have my job. You have your bank account, I have my bank account. You've got your friends, I've got my friends. That's not a marriage. That's a business negotiation that's constantly.
See, another jump. You don't have a real marriage. You can't have a marriage that looks different than mine. If it does look different, it's not real. It's not a real marriage. You see the jumps that they make? It's very interesting. You're either in or you're out. It's interesting. Holding each man up as a strong woman. Yeah.
Being reconsidered. And so, a marriage is never 50-50. It's 100-100. And I would ask for the man to ask the sobering question, like, am I a safe place for my wife? Does she feel like she can't trust me because of betrayal or selfishness or irresponsibility or maybe even being harsh or whatever? And she's like, I have to be independent because if I'm with him, I'm in danger. Well, then that's the underlying issue, and that's a crisis. And if the issue is she just wants to be independent, sometimes it's a generational curse that's put on her previously. Like,
if you're an independent woman, okay, let's just rack up what they've said so far. If you're an independent woman, it means that you might have been abused. If you're an independent woman, it means that you have daddy issues. If you're an independent woman, it means that you're not really connected and dependent on God. If you're independent, you are under a generational curse. Well, wow. Okay.
grew up in a divorce home, the parents are like, well, never fully give yourself to your spouse because they're probably going to leave you. And so you need to just keep a part of and you're like, oh gosh, no, this is a generational brokenness that we're inheriting sometimes as well. It's just like
I don't know what reality Mark's living in, but yeah, people disappoint you and leave you and leave families devastated. That's true. Being absolutely, utterly dependent on them is problematic. So yeah.
Talked about in the sermon, it's just a selfishness. Like, I just don't want to do things for anyone else. So
it's so selfish to want to be an independent woman. Oh my gosh. You could be like caring for your child and stuff like that, but it's so selfish to want to be an independent woman, to be able to self-sustain, maybe have a career, maybe be able to take care of your kids. Should your husband die, or heaven forbid your husband leave, or whatever reason, nope. The woman just has to be completely dependent on this guy. Otherwise, it's a generational curse.
I'm going to be independent. I'm going to be the stubborn one.
So a husband, you can respond to what he should do. But in my opinion, if I was that, usually there's hurt, like we've talked about. And so as a husband, I think you need to pray for and over your wife. I think you need to pray against the spirit of independence in her, and that
I bind the spirit of independence in you, wife. I bind it. I take away your college textbooks and I bind your spiritual independence. How dare you have a second checking account? How dare you?
Would ask the Lord how to be the safe person for her to kind of break down with and be vulnerable and get to the root of that independent issue.
Well, and I mean, this will be controversial.
No, from you, Mark Driscoll, controversial? Nah, not at all. Never.
Not said anything.
Why are they so close? Well, they're married, Ox. They're married.
Controversial in the past. So this is a good time to start. But women who think they're independent, their men see them as controlling. And it's like, okay, so you're...
Women that are independent, men, I'm going to translate that for you. Women that are independent, men like him are insecure and go, oh my God, you're going to control me. I can't just keep up with this. Oh my God. What? I can't have you independent. Oh my gosh. You're controlling me. Interesting. Sometimes independent folks can better support a partner when one party needs help, regardless of the party. Right. Look at, Stephen Hawking, is that his name? The physicist that ended up with ALS. His wife, tremendous strength taking care of him. Tremendous strength. Most people with ALS do not live as long as he did. They live like 5 years and they die. His wife took care of him and said, you know what? Talk about somebody that's like self-sacrificing. If you have ever been a caretaker of anybody, it is very self-sacrificing, but it's love. It's a love that she had for him. And like that woman, independent. She wasn't dependent on him. She was independent. and wasn't controlling or bad or anything like that. But that woman was like, had she been some subservient wife that didn't know how to take care of herself, they'd be in a much different position, I think. So I have a career. I took time when my child was a baby to stay at home, and then he went to school and I went back to work. I have no regrets. See, I think that's great. I think that I've seen a lot of things in my life, and I've seen what a disaster it is to completely rely on a man. What an absolute disaster. All I can say is that line from my big fat Greek wedding: the man is the head, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants. Yeah, I think that was the aunt with the twin. She's like, I got a twin inside my neck or something. That one. Yeah, I think, or was it the other mom? It could have been the mom that said that. But yeah, they were basically letting dad go, yeah, dad, you're the boss. and then they would influence him. So yeah, I remember that line. That's funny.
We're in control. And the point is, the Lord needs to be in control of the relationship. And we were with our pastor, Jimmy Evans, not long ago. His book, The 4 Laws of Love, is incredible. And he had a great analogy. He said that, when God says, let us make man in our image and our likeness, it's a reference to the Trinity. It's not good for the man to be alone. It brings the woman. And so in a marriage, God is still in the position of the father. He is in control. He is in authority. The husband and the wife are not in control. They're not in authority. God is. And then the Bible says that the husband should love his wife as
Christ loved the church.
Christ loved the church. So the man needs to be like Jesus.
Not going to happen.
And then the woman is the helper, which is the same title for God, the Holy Spirit. And so a Trinitarian marriage is God is in control, God is in authority. The husband is to be like Jesus, and the woman is to be like the Holy Spirit. Question, is the Holy Spirit weak? Oh, very strong.
That's interesting. There actually, a lot of people call that a heresy. That's interesting. There's actually a whole theology of like this idea of God and the Trinity, that the Holy Spirit is feminine. It's like the feminine part of the Trinity. And it's so funny because he just displayed that. And I could imagine so many people like James White just rolling in the grave going, oh my gosh, heresy. I think that's hilarious. Man is to be like Jesus. What the fuck? It is. I'll tell you what. A lot of problems happened from St. Paul, and St. Paul did write that. So, but that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. So, yeah.
And very helpful, but aligned and unified with Jesus, and they work together. And in Jesus' life, he does everything with the Holy Spirit. They're never adversarial. They're always aligned. And so a Christian Trinitarian marriage is not, well, are you in charge or am I in charge? Are you in control or am I in control? It's he's in control, and we're seeking together to obey and do his will.
So again, this theology is complementarianism, and you might even go to a church and have this theology in place and not know that that's the accepted theology of that particular denomination or dogma. But it's in there, and very persuasive and moderate to fundamental Christian churches, and it's varying degrees of authority. Some are a little more looser, some are not. But yeah, the man has authority over the house, and so that's the whole thing. There is another theology out there called egalitarianism. One of the people that I knew, who was a professor at a seminary, wrote a book about egalitarianism. And I think it's called Back to the Garden by Glenn Scourgy. And Glenn Scourgy is not even a progressive Christian. He was just a moderate Christian, but he was Canadian. And one thing I noticed about Canadian Christians is they have a different lens than a lot of American evangelicals. And as a Canadian Christian, he was an egalitarian. And he was like, look, this is my argument of why I think that there is egalitarianism. You'll find that I stumble over words sometimes. I run out of words. I talk so much that I just start to go blip, blip, blip. Anyway, so he makes an argument about like how the symbolism of pulling out of the rib cage is the reason why that is not very literal. It's not like he like actually used the rib, but it's in the creation story of pulling out of the rib and saying, here I created you a woman, Adam, is the idea of that they are an equal partnership, that it's from the side. It's not from like a different lower part of the body. It's literally from the side. And he makes some arguments of why egalitarianism is better for everybody. So it's kind of interesting.
We both submit. And again, if we're independent of each other, the truth is we're independent of him. Because what he's saying is you need to be one. And we're saying, no, we're going to be two.
Except that, like, here's the thing, like again, it depends on how you describe independence. Like they're really describing independence as being completely disconnected, like as if you can't have some sort of partnership or egalitarian sort of relationship and be financially dependent should something happen, God forbid, knock on wood. You can't have your own pursuits. You have to completely align to his pursuits. So, I mean, does this extend as far as like, do I need to watch football after every Monday night? Like is this, you know, I need to be a subservient wife and go, yes, football's the way to go. He said that you can't have your own friends. If you notice really early on, he's like independent friends. You can't have your own friends. We have to have mutual friends. It's very interesting what he's proposing, and he's sliding in an awful lot of ideas in a short amount of time.
So any division here really is a reflection of division up there, saying, God, I'm not going to do what you say.
I'm muted again like an idiot. I'm muted again. Pastors like him have the guise of looking like they're the cool guy, and the sense that, I mean, like he drinks whiskey and he's a pastor. Well, a lot of pastors aren't allowed to drink whiskey. When I worked in church, I had a sign of things saying I would not drink at the time, and so as long as I worked in church, I was not allowed to have a drink. And so he's just like, oh, I'll break those rules. I'm going to drink a whiskey. He is one of those people that's like, oh, let's talk about sex in explicit detail in his books, in his talks. And that horrifies a lot of people. They're like, oh, a lot of really conservative Christians go, oh my God, you can't talk about that. And he goes, read Song of Solomon. And he has a point. Song of Solomon actually is really racy. It really does have body fluids in it. Like, I think the Bible, if you are offended by body fluid, if you're offended by saying the word penis, if you're offended by sex education, things like that, like, I don't know if you've read your Bible, but read Ezekiel, read Hosea, read Song of Solomon. Like it might say in poetic terms things like that, but a mission of donkeys, like there are words and phrases there that are really quite crude in the Bible. And I just think, it's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, he's a little bit of an edgelord that way, but don't let that fool you, because he's actually a fundamental Christian in most ways.
Say, it manifests itself in the marriage, but it's a deeper issue. And this will be, controversial. This is where in our day, it's like, well, I'm not taking my husband's last name, 2 last names. We're not going to go to the same church.
I wish he would stop holding her like he's afraid she'll run away. Yeah. Like it is sort of that kind of tension. It's she doesn't look very happy either right now. It's kind of interesting.
And what you get there, friends, you get division.
She's like, this is a minefield.
And Jesus says that a house divided falls down, will not stand. And division literally is 2 visions. And division is what happens when you get at least 1 or 2 independent people who don't have the same vision. And I'm just telling you, they may do like train tracks for a while, but eventually there is tremendous distance and there's a total collapse of the relationship. And so if you want to be independent, just plan on being alone.
So look at the scare tactics they use. If you're an independent woman, you're going to be alone because you're controlling. You have daddy issues. You obviously were abused. You're under a generational curse. Like, do you hear this? Do you see how this is lined up? Like first they're scratching their head going, well, independent, like this, what issues would this woman have? Well, she clearly was abused. She clearly has daddy issues. She clearly hates men. she clearly, like is under a generational curse. They come up with all these interesting things. Clearly, she's not actually a Christian because she's not connected to the vine. Hint, hint. That's what that means if you're cut off from the vine. And also, like, you're not going to stay together. No man's going to stay with you. You're going to get divorced. And this sounds like Pearl, if you've ever listened to Pearl. It's very, very toxic. Not only is he toxic in leadership in Mars Hill, but like the things that he teaches is toxic masculinity repackaged.
And if you want to be together, then plan on being interdependent in relationship with the Lord. And a lot of times this is out of abuse, or it's out of trauma, or it's out of pain.
So if you're like this, it's out of abuse and out of trauma, is their thing. You have a lot of Christians that are like Matthew Powell, Greg Locke, that are just overtly disgusting. I would even say Piper is overtly gross, or MacArthur. But like there's just varying extremism on that. But he's a little more slippery in this way. And there's something that he just said that just I kind of slipped up and missed here. So let me go back a little bit.
Out of pain.
Oh, the use of trauma. So you are independent and you have the need for independence. So it must be trauma that's caused this. This is not the only time I've heard churches do this. So if you have ever been a victim of conversion therapy, like I have, let me tell you something. They will go, you're bisexual or gay because of trauma. It's clearly that you were abused, and that's the reason why you're bisexual and gay. Never mind that there's plenty of people that are abused that remain heterosexual, but clearly you have been abused. And so they take a more quote unquote loving approach by saying you're just broken and need healing. And so, I mean, I would prefer that approach as opposed to, say, the Greg Locke that's just like, let's get the stones out and stone you like a good old fashioned Old Testament stoning. Greg Locke's awful. And so I will prefer this over the Greg Locks, but he's still in that fundamental category. It's just a sliding scale. It's just a sliding scale. Just going to catch up really quick. In building, material engineers don't people like to fail safe? 2 avenues of reinforcement. That's true. So what happens when your husband gets diagnosed with ALS? What happens when your husband dies in a construction accident? I was working in the grocery store, and one of my good friends was Hispanic, and she's I say was because we don't know each other anymore. Like, life puts people in different directions later on. But my work friend was Hispanic, and she was number 12 out of 12 kids. Number 12. And so we were baggers together in the grocery store. Here I am like 17, and she's like 18. And her dad, who is a painter at work, who's providing for all those kids, and yeah, they're growing up and everything, but like he's providing for his family and stuff like that. Big central, like they all doted on their dad. Big central figure in the family falls off a ladder and dies. This is he's a man that goes up ladders every day for work. It's something that he does every single day, and he just died. So like having independence is actually great. So the mom in that family did not have independence because she had a ton of kids. And I'm not going to bash anybody for having a ton of kids, though it is incredibly hard to have 12 kids, let alone 5. I'm number 5. I'm part of a fairly quote unquote big family. I'm number 5. But so this mom has never been independent in her life. She's always been dependent on the dad. And so it was up to the kids, who are now independent because they're from a different generation and they don't have 12 kids to take care of, that they have to take care of mom, because mom doesn't know how to take care of herself anymore. Like it's one of those things where, okay, that's great. Just be dependent on your husband until he's an absolute abuser, or until he's a jerk, or until he's addicted, or until he has a disability, or until he cheats on you and leaves you. Just be dependent on him. It's fine. Or, he could be the nicest guy on earth and he still could fall off a ladder. Lots of projection going on by this dude. He doesn't want a wife. He wants a totally dependent, subservient, obedient woman to him. I agree. If you watch her, she is literally going, what can I say? Am I messing up? Is this good? Am I doing good? Hand on the shoulder is just a power move, like your child or whatever. Yes. But Mark Driscoll, again, has that reputation. He has a reputation of being a dick. He does. People that worked under him said he was a bully.
Yeah, and it definitely, if there's kids involved, you'll watch the kids start to divide as well, because it creates a whole family dynamic of independence and not community. And
how you don't want to teach your kids to be independent. They need to be dependent on you. And the wife needs to be dependent on him. And we just all need to be dependent on each other, because that's mentally healthy.
Unity in the family system. And so it is sad, but I guess my instruction would be, or my encouragement would be, to try and dig deeper to the root and not just see the outside issues that are going on of it.
Gretchen, good to see you. By the way, good to see everybody. I didn't say hi to everybody in chat. It's because I'm old school and we just kind of get going sometimes. So welcome everybody. Beck, Hannah, Maya, Chaos, polynomial. I always want to say polyamorous, which just shows you where my mind is. Ox, Hannah, I'm sorry, Wilson, Phantom, Ama Rose, all y'all. Always glad to see you guys. So anyway, let me teach you, young grasshopper, or let her talk. Well, she needs to be dependent on him. See, so
independence and control or fear or whatever, but digging to the root and allowing her to really get to that space. And she may need to work through with a Christian counselor to be able to really break through some of those habits and
So if you want to break independence, go see a Christian counselor, because we need to, clearly you're broken. If you're a woman that has a career or your own bank account, or you're independent and you don't necessarily need a husband to survive or take care of your kids or pay the mortgage, clearly you need to see a counselor, because you're under a generational curse. You're abused. It's clearly trauma. You're cut off from the vine, which means cut off from God, and reasons.
Those lies that maybe she's believing, and maybe inner vows from the lies as well.
Well,
pretend fashionita. Hey, walking the pups. Hi. Let's see here. Yes, a Christian counselor will do it. Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to be a Christian biblical counselor. Now, there are Christian counselors who actually go through and actually get a psych degree, and they're in family care ministries, and they do an excellent job. That, like, really, truly. Those are not the people that Shannon Q exposes, but there are Christian counselors that get a certification and say, I'm a biblical Christian counselor, and they have zero to do with psychology, zero training whatsoever.
Well, and again, the man needs to ask, like, is there some reason that she doesn't feel safe with me and can't trust me?
We are watching Mark Driscoll. Mark Driscoll is a cult of personality pastor who ran a very big mega church called Mars Hill. And it fell apart around probably 2014, 15-ish. He has reinvented himself like a phoenix from the ashes and is now a pastor again. And he's got a lot of YouTube clips and stuff like that. And I say, like, Mark Driscoll's like the quintessential man's man pastor, that's very Trumpian, that's very anti-woke, that's very white-centric, very evangelical, I'm a moderate, but I hide fundamental ideas under my sleeve guy. So yeah, there's a lot of things I have to say about Mark Driscoll. He was outed for being an extreme bully and absolutely toxic to work with.
If so, he can't just look at her and quote all the verses, about I'm, the head of the house. It's like, but you're supposed to be like Jesus. And if you're not like Jesus, if I don't feel safe with you and I can't trust you, then those are the underlying issues. And so, yeah, under this question are a lot of issues, but our culture will say, well, there's two ways to do it, God's way and this other way. And we would say God's only going to bless his way. And if you want God's anointing and blessing,
It's interesting. I think Catholics actually do have Christian counselors too. Catholics have their own version of gay conversion. I think there was one that was called Courage, and that was their version of Exodus Ministries. So, I mean, they do have quote unquote Christian counselors in Catholicism, but they're kind of rebanded differently, and they're not as common, and they're usually in the U.S., but I would say that they don't really stand out like they do in evangelical land.
blessing on your relationship, it needs to be done in obedience to his word. And good luck trying to have a great marriage without God or without his.
Pretend fashionista, that is exactly what an independent woman would say. Oh, today we've learned that independent women are that way because they've been abused, because they have daddy issues, because they are controlling, because they're under a generational curse, because they're cut off from God. So exactly what an independent woman like you would say. Exactly.
His blessing. So thank you for, we've always tried to do life together.
IBLP, I've talked about it briefly, IBLP and other ones like that, like Goddard's and stuff like that. But you have to be careful with IBLP because there's some things that you want to play and expose them on. But if you do, you can get flagged for hate speech. And that's one of the problems with YouTube is you can place like a hateful person and say like, hey, this needs to be criticized. But YouTube can still flag it as hate speech, which is very frustrating. We have trauma too. We all have trauma. Every single person has trauma, by the way. Like I'm sure Driscoll himself has trauma. So it's very kind of interesting how like an independent woman, clearly she has trauma. But that guy that's insecure with the independent woman, you notice when he said he was like, well, independent women want to control men. That's his insecurity speaking. He's insecure.
We've always been good friends. There are definitely times that I was emotionally
abusive, probably
not the healthiest person, or I was distracted at work. And I think there were times for sure that you have felt very lonely, and I apologize for those. And I'm glad we're in a different season, a better season by God's grace.
He's feigning vulnerability in the interview. Like he did. I better look like I'm vulnerable and caring because I have this reputation that I'm a dick.
But thank you for not being independent. Thank you for working toward the friendship.
Thank you for not being independent, wife. It would be a shame if you were independent because then you'd be controlling me.
Time. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for leading well and really leading from the word of God. Honestly, you've never wavered from that. And that brings a lot of safety for a wife to be spiritually led, knowing that you are submitting to God and we'll figure it out after that,
It's interesting that we're projecting a lot of things like what would cause a woman to be independent? Clearly it's trauma, generational curse, all these sort of ideas that they were coming up with. It's interesting. No one's asking the question, what causes a woman to want to be dependent on her husband? Is it a societal norm? Is it something else? So it's kind of interesting.
Cool. You want to pray for him, babe? Thank you.
All right. So that's an introduction to Mark Driscoll here. Mark Driscoll is definitely amusing for unirach to pick. Out of all the people to introduce really early on when you're trying to be like, I'm going to evangelize, you pick this guy.
Western culture. And woke is the opposite of being born again.
one of the things children really like,
My
and if you want to have a stable life with kids, is you build.
It's a whole secular cult called Wokism. It's a non-religious but highly spiritual cult that is.
I don't know anybody that's like, hey, I'm Wokism, y'all. I'm Wokism. I mean, I made that joke. I had jumped into Brojo's chat, and Brojo is like libertarian land, like, and I'm an MRA, and I've been hurt by women. Sorry, Brojo, but like that's what your chats become. So I go in there knowing that I'm like a minority, you know, going in there like most women never tried to go in there because it's awful. It's like it's a dumpster. It's not for everybody, but you know, I was just feeling feisty that day. But one of the guys was like, don't tell me you're one of those woke religious people. And I said, oh, I'm woke as fuck. I'm woke as fuck.
Has overtaken Western culture. And woke is the opposite of being born again. Everything God creates.
So if you are woke, whatever that means, that's a whole umbrella for these people. You clearly aren't a Christian.
Satan counterfeits. So in Christianity, you are born again, and in Wokism, you are awakened to see how you're a victim, not a villain, how you're a good person, not a bad person, how nothing in you needs to change, but everyone needs to change how they respond to you. And in Christianity, when you get saved and you're born again, then you get baptized, and the counterfeit of that in the woke culture is coming out of the closet. That's their way of taking their private beliefs public and no longer being ashamed of their behavior. It's a whole.
Mark Driscoll wants all the gays to go back in the closet, y'all. Can you stop being woke and coming out of the closet? It's upsetting Mark Driscoll. Okay. Like I know some of these people in my chat have come out of the closet. You got to get back in. Mark Driscoll is upset. I like baby Jesus. God and I are cool. It's his crazy fan club that I have issues. Thank you. Thank you. Right? Like I find Jesus compelling. When I read accounts of Jesus, I find a lot of Jesus like Sermon on the Mount. Why are these pastors not talking about the Sermon on the Mount? That is beautiful. Like it's beautiful. No. Why are we talking about like what does it mean to give all of your belongings to the poor? Like why did Jesus mention that? We don't want to talk about that part either in the US. We are very capitalism centric, and we don't want to sound like any communists over here in America. We're not going to talk about that part either. Rip. It's so funny because like they always say, oh, these progressive Christians are just tearing out things of the Bible, usually St. Paul. and yet like Jesus's own words are often ignored, which is funny to me. But yeah, what in the world? Well, I'm talking about religion, so fair enough, guys. Like, you know, but particularly Mark Driscoll, because I was fascinated that unirach, out of all the people that you could show to be like, look, guys, I'm in love with Jesus. Mark Driscoll, folks.
Secular cult called Wokism. It's a non-religious but highly spiritual cult that has overtaken Western culture. And woke is the opposite of being born again. Everything God creates, Satan counterfeits. So in Christianity, you are born again, and in Wokism, you are awakened to see how you're a victim, not a villain, how you're a good person, not a bad person, how nothing in you needs to change, but everyone needs to change how they respond to you. And in Christianity, when you get saved and you're born again, then you get baptized, and the counterfeit of that in the woke culture is coming out of the closet. That's their.
Do you see how he just slides in that dig? If you're gay, you're not one of us. You're Antichrist. Interesting. Thank you for leading well. If I ever said that. Thank you for leading well. If I ever said that to my husband, he'd sigh the poo out of me. Well, clearly you're too independent. Just saying, you have a college degree. You obviously have had a career that's done you well. You just have been too independent. Like it's a problem. You're on one train track. Your husband's on the other. And I mean, like it's mainly a business arrangement, according to Mark Driscoll. You're just in a business relationship. Yeah, like that's not what marriage is about. Marriage is about the man leading the husband and having control. And if you are an independent woman, Mark Driscoll says you are a woman that's trying to control your man. So you're controlling your man. So interesting. Oh gosh. So it's interesting. Mark Driscoll is criticized by Christians often. So conservative Christians say he's involved in licentiousness. So because he talks very bluntly and sometimes crudely about sex, because he's like, hey, sex is in the Bible, Song of Solomon, guys. He is willing to talk about things that are edgy. He's talked about, like, maybe you should put an aluminum pole in your bedroom. Like, he literally says things like this. He says, sodomizing your wife, okay by me. He's out there in that way. So he is an edgelord when it comes to sex within marriage. He'll be like pretty R-rated about it. And he drinks whiskey. So, he's very popular amongst libertarian Christian men that are looking for somebody that's sort of along this ilk. What's interesting is whenever he is approached by like opposing Christian views, like egalitarianism, where it's like, no. It's not complementarianism where the man is the boss of the woman, and like says, no, you're partner together and you're equal together. And so his response to that is, well, you guys are all just pansies. Like, one of the words he likes to use pansy a lot. He calls Episcopalians fluffy little bunny rabbits. He calls people like in the Methodist Church homo evangelicals. So he's a salty guy. He's pretty salty. Let's see. I don't get these Christian Muslim religions that infiltrates grown women. I know it's weird because, like, I think they're saying their insecurities out loud. So Mark Driscoll is best known for his authoritarian leadership of Mars Hill. His controversial teachings were one thing. It got a lot of attention. But the problem when he was leadership was just story after story of him being toxic, just being awful to work for. A very unhealthy guy. And that's just within the church leadership. So one of the things that has stand out, like, for people that have left Mars Hill and had worked with him, was that he is a control freak. Shocker, right? He's a control freak. He's overbearing. He's bullying. Now, I don't know if you remember who Ted Haggard is. Ted Haggard was a TV evangelist / megachurch guy. And Ted Haggard did a lot of things. Hookers and blow. Ted Haggard is the one that famously cheated on his wife with a man. And had gay sex and was like, oh, well, hookers and blow. I never had all this power before. Oh my gosh. I was so tempted. And so, like, for a while, like, they were like, oh my gosh. And they, like, made him lose his pastorship and everything like that. But then eventually he's like, the Lord has forgiven me and has led me to another place, and I am repentant, and I am in a heterosexual relationship, and I found that I'm just a heterosexual man that was just broken, and oh my gosh, it was just a train crash. Ted Haggard was just a train crash, and I have shown Ted Haggard in the past where they're bashing on a homosexual. So I find Ted Haggard disgusting. But anyway, about Ted Haggard, Driscoll says, Ted Haggard's affair with a male escort is because Ted Haggard's wife let herself go. That is Mark Driscoll. That is the man that Mark Driscoll is. It's not Ted Haggard's fault that he had an affair with a man. It's that his wife let herself go. Because that's what makes people gay. Like, what? Or he could just have been in the closet suffering, and he finally was like, well, maybe no one will know. Shh. No one needs to know. Shh. Rachel says, why is Steve McCrae is a punk up ass motherfucker. Why is Steve comparing trans rights activism to evangelical cults. I think I might showcase Steve's trans hate sometime soon. It's really disgusting. And what's really sad is he's got no horse in that race. He has zero horse in that race. He really does not care. He didn't care about his kid. Sorry. But it's I've never seen evidence of that. He doesn't care about other people's kids. So like, you know, under the guise of like, oh my gosh, I'm so concerned about other people's kids, which I think is a farce and a witch hunt by the right, because if they were so caring about other people's kids and what parents did like, you know, say yes to and no to, they would be against child marriage, and child marriage has a strong foothold in the US still. So I call BS. It's a witch hunt. But it's really easy to dunk on the lowest percentage of people in the United States. So not only is trans folks like the lowest percentage of folks within the LGBTQ, lower than asexuals even, not only are they like the minority of minority, right? So it's real easy to dunk on them, right? Not only that, but he's going to make it so that way if a trans person disagrees with him, he's going to somehow make it like he's victimized. Like he's gonna somehow be like, I'm victimized. Really quick, this is just a side note because now I got distracted by this. I actually have a short on this really quick, and it's a little audio clip. And Steve's asked a question and he answers it, and it's really funny what his answer is on this. So let me find it real quick. Give me a minute because I'm not always the fastest. Lickety split. Here we go. Okay, I found it. Okay, I'm going to share what Steve says. So, funny enough, Reg Rhetoric asked him an interesting question, and it was relevant. Like, what's up with you and all this LGBTQ stuff? What's going on with you, Steve? And his answer is quite telling. So let me find it here. I have so many screens. Where's the screen I want to share? I don't know. I think it's this one. There it is. Okay. Gosh, I have a lot of weird shorts. Anyway.
Why are we talking about, or better yet, I should ask, why have you recently been getting like really involved in the whole LGBTQ plus debate space things?
Good question, Steve. Why are you involved? Do you have somebody that you care about that's LGBTQ? Is somebody in your life, transitioning? Are you concerned because, like you actually know somebody personally that maybe like decided I'm going to transition? No, I'm not. Like, why are you so involved, Steve? What's going on? Why?
Don't know what the proper fucking title is here, but why have we been ramping up the discussions in that area of the internet?
It's been coming around lately on Twitter. News cycle stuff,
It's popular in clickbait, y'all.
Area of the internet.
It's been coming around lately on Twitter. News cycle stuff,
You're clickbaiting.
Don't say the quiet part out loud. Spackle's gonna clip it.
Area of the internet.
It's been coming around lately on Twitter. News cycle stuff,
Why are
Yeah. That's not a good reason, Steve. This is people's life you're fucking with, buddy. Anyway. Gonna clear out of that. And I don't need this window anymore because we're done with the wife. And now it's like, what can I say? And let's see here. So back to Mark Driscoll. So other Christians have some opinions about Mark Driscoll that are a little bit not shining either.
I said, God told me a trap was set. So I asked him, I said,
Let me just say, this is him describing the reason why he left Mars Hill.
Remember, I told you Mars Hill was a huge mega church. There was a cult of personality there. It was really cool. It was like kind of like hipster church, except he's not really a hipster. But it was a cool church to be. Like, it had really good aesthetics, excellence in production, lots of lights and bells and whistles and stuff like that. Rock star Jesus church, you know. He blew up. He wrote some books. He had a huge church, and it just went to smithereens because people said he was so toxic in leadership.
Now, there were a bunch of elders who were calling him for accountability, that he was going through this period where he said that he was going to submit himself and that it would be like church discipline for him and all of that. And then he just ran. He just ran down to Arizona and he started his own church. But he's described.
Yeah, the whole church imploded. The entire church imploded. Like, Mars Hill's no more. Like, it just splintered into different churches.
Being like the in-between of like when he's thinking that he was going to go through some kind of accountability with Mars Hill and the elders there. And then, you know, when he decided to leave. So he was irate. He talks about submission, how a wife needs to submit to their husband. He did not submit to the elders. He did not. He threw a fit. He says that he was praying and his wife was praying. They're different sides of the house, and they both felt like God told them. He didn't say felt like. He said God told them that they were released. And for Mark,
that happens sometimes. I heard LB was praying to Jesus right about the time where Steve McRae wanted an email so he could look at the header of the email, because the whole YouTube fiasco of like Katie Joy struck down my channel, and she said, I prayed to God and he told me to delete it. I mean, how are you going to argue? God told her to delete the email. I mean, what are you going to do about that? You can't say anything.
Heard from God that there was a trap set for him. And this is what he has to describe about that.
Do you know what that might be? And these people that we had known said, the nuclear option was we were going to accuse you of adultery.
Nuclear option, accuse you of adultery. What?
This was at Panera, multiple meetings at Panera.
Panera Bread?
It's like, you guys discussed accusing me of adultery. I was like, that's not true. I've been faithful to my wife my whole life. I adore my wife. I love my wife, and she loves me. We've been faithful to each other. We've been open our whole marriage about any struggles we have had, because we know that every married couple has some hardship to go through, and we have never been dishonest. But we have never done that. We've never done anything remotely like that. They said, that's why we kept it as the nuclear option. I was like, to get me what? They said, to get you out of the pulpit.
Things that didn't happen for 10 for 500, Alex. I don't think this happened.
They said, because we knew that if we accused you of adultery and enough of us signed the open letter, that ultimately there would be such a media firestorm that you would have to exit ministry, exit preaching.
Really cast out on that. Now, I have seen some shady things happen in boards, like really, really shady things that have happened in boards. And every so often, boards go on a witch hunt. Usually 1 or 2 board members, and they look at somebody that's in leadership and go, beep, boop, pop, boop, beep, I'm going to come for you. That does happen. And he was in a very powerful position in a very huge church, and with a cult of personality and rock star Jesus status, so there's that. But I've never seen a board member go, we're going to completely lie about you, and we had a whole plan to go lie about you, and this and that and the other. Almost always these people are just deluded. Like, if they come for you and they make up a lie, like that they really probably truly believe this weird lie that they've come up with. But I just couch this story does not ring true. It does not sound like it's right.
In God's word for probably a year while a full investigation was done.
I want you to notice some things.
Okay. Now, some of you might be watching this and just being like taken back, like, wow, someone would.
Free ad for Panera. We're trying to poison the well, right? Exactly. I've never seen a church that has never been dishonest or a pastor. Oof. That's hard.
Would accuse him of that. All right. No one's ever accused him of that. No, talking about hypotheticals of what someone was willing to do is one thing. Also,
Yeah, he somehow there's this mystery person that said there was a hypothetical nuclear option to say that he was an adulterer to get him out of Mars Hill. So he's got a whole conspiracy that nobody can fact check because, for one thing, you mentioned, like he said, God told me that there would be a trap. So who can argue with what God told me? And second of all, I mean, how are you going to figure out who in the world wanted to hit the nuke button?
so in all of the rise and fall of Mars Hill, no one ever heard about this. No one referenced anything like this. This is coming out of left field. There's a lot of different accusations about Mark Driscoll, but then to talk about investigations like this, look what he's doing.
During that time, we could take over and lead and be in charge. And then we figured one of two things would happen. Either you would come back, but we would be in charge, or you would never come back and you'd be done forever. I came home, I told Grace, I was like,
Grace, I had an absolute fantasy in my head, and I think it's going to be a great way to gaslight everybody.
oh my gosh. Multiple people told me that to my face on separate occasions and days.
Now watch what he does to his congregation.
Absolutely has Alex Jones energy. In fact, attracts people that like Alex Jones, like Unirach.
I want you to be, if I'm going to be your pastor, and I love you, I promise you this, I'll always tell you the truth. And I want you to love and honor and respect Christian leaders and pastors. Don't assume the worst, assume the best. And don't believe everything you hear, and don't contribute to the gossip that just takes lies and gives them life.
Why are you lying on me? No, the good old y'all are lying on me. I'm the victim. I'm the victim. So let me get this straight. He's a toxic leader. His leadership goes, you need to stop this. They try to actually save him as a pastor, knowing that there is a cult of personality, and they are highly aware of it. So they want to keep him as a pastor, but they're sick of this toxic leadership, and something needs to change. How he's treating people needs to change. So they get their elders together. These are the people that he's supposed to submit to and respect. And they go, let's see what we can do to salvage this. Most of the time in big churches, the structure kind of goes like this, that the pastor actually has a lot of power, but they are subservient to either the denomination or the board of elders. And they will come over to you and say, hey, this isn't okay. This is what we need you to do. And they will oftentimes require you to do certain things. They might have you sign an agreement. They might have you go to counseling. They might have you take a break while you reevaluate. And so someone will take your place in the interim before they reinstate you. There's all sorts of things that they can do. But if they think that you've crossed a line and that you need to sort of recalculate your route, they might pull you aside and go, we need you to do X, Y, and Z. I am told that Mark Driscoll didn't want any of that, and he walked. He walked.
He just gaslit his whole congregation. All right. He's saying that there was this hypothetical, like we don't know whether it's true, that someone was willing to do this to get him out of the ministry. And he's using that to his congregation to say, don't listen to those people with their stories, with their gossip. He's the one putting this story out. No one else put this story out. They put out different stories that are true. All right, there's a big difference. They put out different stories that are true, not ones that were made up or that were hypotheticals. He did that. They put out real stories, and he's saying, don't listen to those people, congregation.
Don't listen to those people, guys. Don't listen to them, because I prayed in my house on one side of the house and Grace prayed on the other side of the house. And we came to the conclusion when we got back together that it's a trap.
Listen to me. Why? I'll never lie to you. I'll never lie to you. Trust me. That is what it looks like to gaslight
Cult of personality.
a church. To say, don't listen to that podcast. Don't listen to the people talking about me online. Yeah, they're bringing up all kinds of past things. Did you know what they were willing to do? They never said it, but I think that they were willing to do this. Isn't that awful? I would never cheat on my wife. No one ever accused him of that. They accused him of other things that were disqualifying for a pastor.
That channel is called Dean Linetti, and his channel is he's not shy to call out some people's bad behaviors, and so he's connected to some deconstructionists, and let me see if it has a thing. He doesn't really, he's Canadian, so that's probably why he's fairly reasonable. I hate to say that. So that's his channel. I don't think I always agree with him, but he says he's the home of underdog theology. So but I think it's interesting that he was willing to call out somebody, because a lot of times people won't. They'll circle the wagons because he's one of us. So I can't ever do that. But even more conservative Christians are saying a lot of interesting things. So like, here's a more conservative Christian, and he's not so stoked either. Let's see. This is a short titled Spiritual Abuse. So, which is, that's a...
Some of you will know him, some of you won't. Mark Driscoll said that he is a pastor because God told him so. He says, God told me to plant a church, God told me to preach and lead men, and then God told me to marry a certain woman. So a voice came out of heaven in the woods and told Mark Driscoll what he should do. Now, question, can anyone just argue with that? Yes or no? You sure that wasn't just bad lunch that you had, Mark? I mean, how do you know? You go, well, where's that go? Okay, listen, where it goes is the last 10 years. That's the same man who stood up in front of his congregation and to the men sitting next to their wives publicly berated them. Time and again, and he's still doing it today. Mark Driscoll.
Yeah, Mark is not shy about humiliating people. that has been an ongoing complaint for people that deal with him. Sally has something to say. One second. I'm back. Sorry. So there's an interview. I don't know how far I'm going to go. This is a very long interview, so I don't think I can make like 46 minutes of this. But he says some interesting things in this interview and says a lot of quiet parts out loud. So Mark Driscoll thinks that demons are taking over America, y'all. Demons. And if you thought that Mark Driscoll was sort of like a Christian Alex Jones, you wouldn't be wrong. Yeah, I mean, Alex Jones thinks that, frogs are turning gay. Mark Driscoll's obsessed with the feminization and gayness of America coming out of the closet and Wokism. And he thinks that demons are taking over.
And across the country. And I think you have such an amazing gift from the Lord to teach the...
Let me make sure I'm sharing audio.
Pretty much verse by verse, week by week.
Anyway, he says he's been teaching the Bible for 30 years.
And what I always say is the Bible is not a book that just tells us what happened, but what always happens. And we tend to think of it as an old book. It's not. It's an eternal book. And so it's always timely because it's
Dum. Yeah, Joseph Smith had a voice in the woods and the plates and had a vision. And then something happened and it broke and he had to like go and get a new vision.
over all the times. And so for me, if you can't connect what's going on in the culture with what's said in the scripture, people have no idea how to interpret everything that they're going through.
So I'm going to ask you to repeat what you said like 5 minutes ago when we were off camera because it was perfect. So why'd you write the book?
I was preaching through 1st and 2nd Kings, book in the Old Testament, and realized that the same things that they were dealing with in the ancient nation of Israel about 3,000 years ago are exactly the same cultural, political issues we're dealing with today.
No, they're not. They're not. What? So Israel, well, first of all, Israel is trying to establish itself in the Old Testament. Let's just talk about really quick. They are a tribe, and a lot of the Old Testament is neighboring tribes warring against each other. And there's a lot of story and I think the Bible's fascinating, by the way, but there's a lot of stories of, Israel getting wooed over to monotheism and getting yanked back to polytheism and wooed over to monotheism and yanked back to polytheism. And, there's these neighboring tribes that have these gods, and sometimes they're even named the same as the Hebrew God. So there's different names for Yahweh, which is the Hebrew God, and there's about 5 L's, E-L, and I don't remember all of them, but like El Shaddai is the one that stands out the most. But there's also Elohim, El Shaddai, and there's a couple others. All these El gods, you think, oh, well, that's, all these descriptions of Yahweh, of this is Israel God. But the weird, interesting thing is that these El gods also are talked about in Canaanite. Like the Canaanites also have these same descriptions of God. They're like, yeah, my God is the warrior and the protector, El Shaddai. And then Israel's like, no, my God is El Shaddai. And so like there's a whole different situation of these neighboring tribes. They're competing for it. Israel's trying to establish a nation at one point, and there's this constant conquering and taking over, and then rising up for power and conquering and taking over. Israel doesn't even like have a king for very long if you go by the the Old Testament narrative and skip any like archaeology. Like they get King Saul, yay, we got a human king, yay, and then they get King David. And then right at Solomon, it starts falling. It starts going sideways right at Solomon. So they make it like 3 kings. And then Solomon's line it just explodes from there. And then you have Jeroboam and Rehoboam, son of Solomon, and it splits in half and it starts to divide even more again. And now they're back into, we're a wandering tribe. So Israel is always struggling in the biblical narrative to actually be a nation. We're already a nation. I don't know. I don't think we're struggling to become a nation. We're not a wandering tribe. And I don't think we're going, my El Shaddai is better than your El Shaddai. I mean, there's competing ideas in religion, but like, it's definitely not the same thing. We're not warring tribes.
So it got me asking, if you see the same issues happening in different cultures and different nations and different governments with different people, what's the causation? And it's spiritual. That people...
I mean, the same issues, which issues are we talking about? Are we talking about the issue when God sought to kill Moses because Moses wouldn't circumcise his son? So then Moses's wife circumcises the son and throws the foreskin on the ground. Like, is that the issue that we're talking about? Or is it the issue, who do we need to stone? Or that, what kind of abominations are actually still abominations, like eating shellfish? I mean, which issues?
People come and go, but the demons remain the same. And
the demons remain the same, y'all. The demons. Lord, I cast out the demon of AOC.
We're dealing with is truly demonic.
Bobert is God sent, but AOC is the devil.
The progressive agenda, wokism, kind of soft beta male woke Christianity.
Beta male. I told you, he appeals to this sword boy, beta male, out cook. He appeals to this, I'm a man's man, you know, I'm in control. It's really male fragility on parade, but they don't realize it.
Is all demonic in its ancient paganism, and it's the same thing that happened in the days of Elijah.
So let's go through some of the characters: Ahab, Jezebel, Elijah. For the uninitiated audience,
Hannah speaks truth. Guys like Driscoll believe anything quote unquote feminine is bad for society. Women are a source of evil in the world, and she's weak enough to be deceived by the serpent. Ba-ding! You got it. And what's fascinating here is what's interesting with pastors like Driscoll and this sort of really bad thinking in theology is they will point out that Eve is fooled by the snake. And bear with me for a minute because it's very interesting. In Catholicism, there's statues of Mary, and you know, most Protestants go, boo, idol worship, boo, 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 you know, you're replacing Jesus with Mary, boo. But let's just put that on pause and just look at the symbolism. If you look at the symbolism of Mary, it's fascinating. So Eve is fooled by the snake, right? So she has the reputation of being the first human to say no to God. Unless you go by the Jewish, and this is within Christianity, so clearly, but unless you like somehow want to dip into like the Jewish folklore of Lilith, which is not in, you know, the normal canon, but Eve has the reputation of being the first person to say no to God. So she's fooled by the snake. So therefore she's just weak-minded, and she's also devious, and she convinces Adam to sin too, and all this stuff. So you always see, like, you know, pictures of Eve with the snake kind of wooing her and seducing her, not sexually, but like, you know, like to like, you know, did God really say that? You know, trying to seduce her into sinning. Now, in Catholics have this image of Mary, and it's look it up sometime. It's interesting that there's several statues of Mary stepping on a snake, and it hails from a couple of thoughts, and it's actually quite interesting. I enjoy the symbolism. Mary is the first Christian. I'll say that again. Mary is the first Christian. And I always thought it was interesting that so many Protestants and evangelicals devalue Mary's position. And I don't mean even like, oh, you have to pray to Mary like that, but just devalue. They've gone the other extreme and devalued her position so far. The Catholic Church and even Eastern Orthodox recognize that Mary's the first person to say yes to Jesus. All right, in this sort of theological thinking. So there is a lot of pictures of Mary, the statue of Mary, and she's stepping on the snake. So you see these imageries and these paintings of Eve being seduced by the snake, and then Mary comes along and steps on the snake. And there's a lot of statues where Mary's just stepping on that snake and smashing it down. And there's a verse that it's referencing in Genesis, and they tie it to this idea of that, you know, yeah, sure, Eve's the first person to say no to God, but then Mary turns it around on its head and says yes. Interesting. So, let me see here. I'm just catching up on things. I remember that my demon haunted world well, but you don't ever remember talking about beta males? Me neither. I mean, when I believed like, you know, like there was demons everywhere, I didn't think it was all beta males, but you know, you live and you learn, you know, it's really all about Wokism. Mary is revered in Catholicism, which is a good thing. Yeah, I generally think it's a good thing. Good trouble equals Eve.
Audience, who are these people and why does it matter?
So 3,000 years ago in the nation of Israel, they were supposed to be like us, a nation founded under God, and they
So Israel's not like a nation founded under God. It kind of works a little differently. I mean, the story, if you want to get into it,
God reveals himself to Abraham and says, you will have many descendants that outnumber the stars. And so that's how Israel gets its beginning. Generally, it's the Abrahamic religion.
They weren't. So Ahab was the king. He was passive.
Whoa, we fast forward real fast. So he really fast forward. He jumped from when it's founded. So you got, Abraham to Ahab. Okay. So Ahab is a corrupt lowercase king. He's not an uppercase king. Ahab is married to Jezebel. Jezebel is a wicked woman in the Bible, and she's wicked because she does evil things. But what a lot of these Bible thumping fundamentalist Christians think is that Jezebel is a forward and independent woman, and she's therefore wicked. She's questioning, and she's not under man's authority, so therefore she's wicked. So it's interesting that he jumped. He could have talked about all these moments in Israel's history, but he jumps to King Ahab. Well, that's interesting.
Permissive, tolerant, progressive.
Ahab's progressive.
He was weak, and he was not a man who liked to make decisions or have conflict, and he was fairly incoherent and incompetent. I know
most of the church.
We couldn't imagine a senior political leader like that. His wife, Jezebel, the queen, she was controlling, domineering, overbearing.
He really has a problem with independent women.
Very sexual, and slept her way to the top.
Yeah,
I know,
like Kamala Harris. Yeah.
Well, you.
She slept her way to the top. I don't remember that part in the Bible. That's a big assumption. Interesting. I'd have to double check on that. I don't remember her sleeping their way to the top, because even for a queen, that would get you killed back then.
Said it, and I didn't disagree with it. And so what you have, anytime you have a passive leader and a controlling, domineering, overbearing partner, the point is this: if you tolerate, they will dominate. And
that's so good.
And so the entire,
if you tolerate, they will dominate.
Pride movement, the entire trans agenda, the entire LGBTQIA alphabet soup people agenda is tolerate. And Jesus talked.
So make no mistake that not only is he afraid of controlling women who are independent, he thinks that the demons are having you tolerate gay people, tolerate transgender people. And so that's really bad, the tolerate. Tolerate means live and let it live. It's not even embrace. It's sort of like live and let live, buddy. I don't want to do Islam, but you can do Islam. Live and let live. That's tolerance. That's what tolerance is. So tolerance is bad to him. Like tolerance is like the bare minimum of that you can offer a human being. Like it's not even kindness. It's just like, I'll tolerate you. And that's bad. The danger of tolerance. Danger. I killed my way to the top. What's this show about? We were talking about Mark Driscoll mainly. I relate more to Jezebel, Bathsheba, a woman at the well. I like the woman at the well quite a bit. That whole story is interesting to me, because Jesus could have talked about a whole lot of things and zoned in on it. Instead, he doesn't. He acknowledges that she's living with someone she's not married with, and then just sort of moves on. So it's kind of interesting. Jezebel is cruel. She is cruel. It's not that she's independent, it's that she's cruel. And so she's evil for those reasons. It's not because of the reasons he's saying. Bathsheba is a victim. And I know that when I learned about Bathsheba in Sunday school, it was not taught to me as a victim. But when I read it now and I look at it through this lens, like Bathsheba's not a co-adulteress. She's a victim. Hear me out. King David is a powerful king. He sends men to war to die. He says, bring me that person, and they can bring him that person. He can make up some reason to kill that person, and they'll kill that person. He goes up on the roof. He sees this woman bathing on the roof, like that hallelujah song.
And the beauty of the moonlight overthrew ya. So he looks at the roof and he sees this woman bathing on the roof, and bathing on the roof is not some extra promiscuous thing to do. That was considered normal back then. I know, because I've learned about that. So he sees her bathing on the roof, and he doesn't just go, "Oh, she's bathing on the roof, let me look away." He's like, "She's bathing on the roof, salivate." So he says, "Bring me that woman." And they go, but sire, she's married. And he goes, "Oh, well, still bring me her." And so they bring her, and anyway, he sleeps with her. Now I ask yourself, with the power dynamic of the king that has all this power, can she say no? Can she say no to him? And she might be able to morally say no, maybe, but probably not. Can she say no? At best, it's a power dynamic. At worst, she absolutely cannot say no. So it does really, through that lens, it makes me look at David quite sideways. So he brings her over. Now, not only that, he knocks her up, gets her pregnant. And he goes, "Well, crud, I got you pregnant. Well, what am I going to do?" Well, it so happens that your husband Uriah comes back from war. So Uriah comes back from war. He's like a captain or something. Like he leads men in war. And they draw him back. And the idea is, because David's being sneaky, David's like, "You've been a great servant to me, Uriah. Go home and sleep with your wife." So he tries to be slippery. Let's see. He tries to be slippery, and he's like, "Go sleep with your wife, Uriah." But Uriah is like a man of like big, like, I don't know. "I cannot sleep with my wife, with my men out there suffering." And he goes, "Absolutely, I will not." And I think he sleeps on the steps or something. He doesn't even go home. Like he's like, "I will not sleep with my wife." So he makes it so that you can't even have like any inkling, like, Uriah, you slept with your wife. Like Uriah doesn't know his wife's knocked up, and he thinks he's doing the right thing, being going, "I cannot enjoy my life with my men out there suffering." And so he just like falls asleep at the steps. And so now David's like, "Well, heck, what am I going to do?" So David tells other leaders, he goes, "Okay, so what I need you to do is you're going to lead the charge, and you're going to put Uriah up front in the charge. And then I want all the men to fall back." And so literally he sets this man up to get murdered because he saw a woman bathing on the roof and used his power dynamic and coerced her into sleeping with him, and then has the husband killed. Yeah. A man after God's own heart. I've always questioned why that verse is there. It's pretty messed up. Yeah.
Talks about 1,000 years later about Jezebel. Jezebel was not just an ancient queen, but a spirit. And he says, "You tolerate that."
She's not a spirit. That is some folklore there in the United States. Jezebel's spirit is some folklore. Like, okay, so here's how like this Jezebel spirit goes. Okay, usually it's interesting that he's so interested in that Jezebel spirit. Usually when you hear about Jezebel spirit, it's within the charismatic sections of Christianity, like in America, particularly America. And so Pentecostals love to talk about the Jezebel spirit, and more charismatic Southern Baptists like to talk about the Jezebel spirit. And it's kind of interesting because how it works usually is this: a woman wants to be in leadership. Jezebel spirit. A woman asks a question. Now, I don't understand, why God had to create penal substitution. I mean, the creator and sustainer of all things could have created, any other kind of thing. How come we're not embracing like Christus Victor or anything like that? So a woman could ask an honest question of why we follow the theology that we do. Jezebel spirit. And they've always used this to shut down women questioning, shut down women in leadership. And it's like a farce. It's not even a thing. Like it's literally American made up. And that's kind of interesting. If you want to get more views, you need to talk about more current issues. I want to do what I want to do.
And so if I wanted to do more views, I would have fashioned my channel in a different way. If that was my main goal, I wouldn't have covered Steve McRae, that's for sure.
That woman, Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess. She's a highly religious, highly seductive, highly spiritual leader. She teaches false doctrine and she leads people into sexual immorality. And so from Jezebel to the book of Revelation, the Lord Jesus, there's a 1,000-year gap because the demons are the same, even though the people change. And so what we're dealing with today in the church.
Also, I do think it's relevant because actually he's very representative of libertarian men that are also Christian, that are misogynist. Look at his libertarian symbol in the background there, the "Don't Tread on Me" symbol. Like the show that he's on a libertarian show. He is relevant. He's some of the reason why we have people like Boebert.
Is Ahab and Jezebel. In Christianity, most denominations are led by Ahab. The government is led by Ahab. The southern border is open because of Ahabianism. It's a passivity and a tolerance. And
the southern border has been open for a very long time. In fact, California and Texas used to belong to Mexico.
And anytime you tolerate, they dominate. If you tolerate like Ahab, then the Jezebel spirit comes in, dominates, takes over, controls, seduces, sexualizes. And in their days, that included child sacrifice, which was the precursor to government-sponsored abortion, to the Canaanite god Molech. It also included...
That's a big jump too. So abortion is child sacrifice of the Canaanite god of Moloch. I've heard that comparison, or they'll compare abortion to Pharaoh throwing the firstborn into the river of the Nile to get him chomped on by crocodiles, because Pharaoh was nervous about the coming of Moses. So they usually will compare abortion to those things, and that's how they get an anti-abortion argument. They also get the anti-abortion argument from, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, and God has knitted you in the womb. But don't talk to them about Numbers 5, because they will get really upset at you. And it's kind of interesting because Numbers 5 is I think it's 5:20, or is it 25? I'm dyscalculic with numbers, so give me a minute here. I can tell you about it, but I just actually want to look at it. In Numbers, which is like rabbinical law, so like it's, my view has always been like they are struggling to build a nation, and their laws oftentimes are echoes and answers to their neighbors' laws, and it goes back and forth. But for evangelicals in America, they go, no, it's God's perfect will, and the utmost version of ethics and righteousness is the Bible. You can never ever disagree with any of the Bible, including Numbers. So like they'll point out like, oh yay, we get to stone gay people. They'll point out these things, right? Man shall not lay with another man as he does a woman. And so they'll point out those verses that are convenient. But here's an interesting one. Have you ever read The Test for an Unfaithful Wife? It's a little disturbing. It's actually quite interesting though. This is the New International Version, but you can pick any version of the Bible, and it'll have this test for the wife thing. Moloch's a type of sacrifice that uses children. Yeah, they say it's like an oven that they would actually bake the baby. It's really messed up. I don't know if you say Baal or Baal, but Baal sounds cooler. Okay, so test for the unfaithful wife. Actually, it's very uncomfortable if you've never seen this. These people that want these Bronze Age laws. Okay, so then the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, if a man's wife goes astray and is unfaithful to him, so that another man's sexual relationships with her, and it's hidden from her husband, and her impurity is undetected since there's no witnesses against her and has not been caught in the act,
And the feelings of jealousy come over the husband, and the husband suspects his wife is cheating. So the feelings of jealousy, let's see here. Feelings of jealousy overcome the husband, and he suspects his wife of being impure, and he's jealous of her being impure. Then he should take his wife to the priest. He must take an offering of 1/10 of elaf. I don't know what it is. I'd have to look that up. I don't know these sort of weird things by memorizing shekels versus elaf versus whatever. But I think it's irrelevant. details. He should take his offering of barley flour on. Sorry, I'm misspeaking. Of barley flour on her behalf. He must not pour olive oil on it or put incense on it, because it's a grain offering for jealousy, as a reminder offering to draw attention to wrongdoing. The priest shall bring her and have her stand before the Lord. Then the Lord shall take some holy water. Sally, can we not bark right now? I know there's a dog barking out there, but we don't need to bark at them. Sally, get down. What are you doing? Get down. Get down. Hey, get down. 1 second. We're having problems. Sally's going crazy. She's crawling up the wall, literally crawling up the wall because there's a dog barking next door. The priest shall bring her and have her stand before the Lord. He shall take some holy water and clay jar and put some dust from the tabernacle floor into the water. After the priest has had the woman stand before the Lord, he shall loosen her hair and place in her hands a reminder offering, the grain of offering for jealousy, while he himself holds, quote unquote, bitter water that brings curse. Then the priest shall put bitter water. Interesting. What does that mean? Poison? What does that mean? Poison or water that brings a curse. Then the priest shall put the woman under oath and say to her, if no other man has had sexual relations with you, and you have not gone astray and have become impure while married to your husband, this may be bitter water and it brings a curse. But if not, it won't harm you. But if you've gone astray while married to your husband and you have made yourself impure by having sexual relationships with another man other than your husband, here the priest will put the woman under a curse. May the Lord cause you to become a curse among your people when he makes your womb miscarry and your abdomen swell. May this water bring a curse that enters your body and abdomen swells and your womb miscarries. Now, people go, I've had fundamentalists go, no, that's not an abortion. Causing a miscarriage is not an abortion, y'all. No, that's not what that means. What it means is she's going to be really uncomfortable and constipated and bloated. Okay, so this is the new international version. Okay, so a lot of fundings really like King James. So let's go to good old King James. Where's King James? Let's see. King James. I know you're in here somewhere. New Living Bible is like worst ever. Catholic Bible, American. Where's King James? There it is. King James version. There we go. Okay. A lot of people go, that's a really messed up version of that. Don't listen to it. It's not miscarry. What does it say? Okay, we'll go use King James because, a lot of funnies like that. Okay, so here we go. So let's see here. Okay, so King James uses flowery words. So he'll maketh, when he hath made her drink water, then shall come to pass that if she has defiled and done trespass against her husband, that the water that causeth the curse to shall always go some of the ifs are really hard to say. Causeth the curse to enter her and may become bitter. Her belly shall swell and her thigh shall rot, and the woman shall be a curse among her people. So they go, oh, well, she's just, it clearly says thigh. So one of the things to keep in mind in a lot of scripture is they don't say genitals a lot of times. A lot of times they do, but a lot of times they don't. And they use euphemisms for genitals. And so usually they will use the thigh. So this is the upper body. That's a little bit more intimate. That usually needs to be remain covered. So they'll usually use the thigh, and usually they'll use like feet. Feet's another one, like the story of Ruth and Boaz. So there's been a lot of rabbinical commentary that's like, yeah, Ruth uncovered his junk. Like it says that she uncovered his feet, but like that really doesn't make sense why you'd be upset. She uncovered his junk and made him think that he slept with her. That's really what it is with Ruth and Boaz. And so there's these tricky words that are used. And so if you know the cultural context and maybe you study it, you might translate it differently. King James is one of the worst translations ever. Now, it can be poetic sounding. It's much more poetic to say her thigh shall rot than womb miscarry, but the meaning's the same. It ends the same way. Interesting, right? Like that sounds like an abortion to me. I'm just saying. It sounds like a God-sanctioned abortion, priest-sanctioned abortion to me. If you disagree, let me know. But I think it's interesting. But every sperm is sacred, y'all. Every sperm. And it's funny because I actually veer fairly pro-life in my personal beliefs, and socially pro-choice. So I kind of have like finesse on that. But I have always been uncomfortable with that passage. I have always found that a very strange thing to do. And it shows you what property this woman is to this tribe, and that her only worth is to further the tribe and to be faithful to her husband. So yeah, I don't really hold these Bronze Age ethics as the epitome of best ethics that we could follow, but okay, let's talk about it.
Genital mutilation, transgenderism, and in the days of Ahab and Jezebel, they were dealing with drag queens overtaking. And so what you had...
There's nowhere in the Bible about drag kings overtaking. Nowhere. There is nowhere in the Bible about drag queens overtaking.
Then the Jezebel spirit takes over the government, closes the churches, as we saw globally during COVID, took over the...
Jezebel spirit closed because of COVID. Taking medical precautions is Jezebel spirit.
Christian schools, took over the economy, canceled, deplatformed, and killed anyone who disagreed. And this is an entire demonic agenda to replace God with government. That's what's going on in the days of Elijah.
It's interesting he's talking about replacing God with government when we are seeing quite a surge of evangelicals rising to power within government. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, the vinegar, but then so they're different languages. So we're looking at ancient Hebrew versus Greek. So
I mean, that's remarkably deep. I haven't really heard a lot of people connect those dots. Is it just because they don't read the Old Testament, or it's just kind of not parallel to their theology? I mean, that's so clear.
I read the Old Testament, buddy. And that is not what I come up with.
You just articulated.
Well, I think oftentimes people just don't read the Bible. They just don't. And they know, every...
And you, of course, are hoping that people don't read the Bible so you can share your lens. I mean, let's get real. Let's get real. Like people like Mark Driscoll, I think, rise to power because people actually don't read their Bible.
Godhead knows one.
They don't see like that Jesus says, sell all your belongings and give to the poor. They don't read that part.
Verse, God made every seed-bearing plant, and the liberals know one verse, thou shalt not judge. That's about as far as they get. Now, if you dig deep into...
That's not true at all. Liberals oftentimes, and I'm not saying that like everybody's perfect or anything like that, but I will say this, that a lot of liberal Christians do certain things really well. I would say that the Methodist Church has been very good with charity. Very good. And
they're considered a liberal church. Also, Episcopalians have been really good with charity. And so they take very much to the heart to this idea of like that we need to take care of the poor. And so like this whole idea of like, do not judge he that cast the first stone. And that's all it stops as. Like, I disagree. I think that's very, very uncharitable.
The Bible, you'll find, as Jordan Peterson has recently, it's the most amazing, fascinating, incredible book that's ever written. Because
profundity is beyond.
Well, because when you read the Bible, it's the only book that as you study it, it studies you. And when you meet with it, the author meets with you to help you learn it. And so it's a supernatural experience when you actually take the Word of God seriously.
And so diving into this,
I always found the Bible as like very much like the struggle of human nature, grappling with being human nature, and then also grappling with the divine. And it's always a struggle in the Old Testament. The whole thing is a struggle. And I mean, there's reasons why, if you were to take an English lit course, a lot of times, at least here in Southern California, liberal Southern California, if you take an English lit course, a lot of them have you get a Bible. And the reason is because a lot of this English literature references the Bible like constantly. And then if you take like if you were to read like East of Eden, which is American literature, John Steinbeck, East of Eden is completely the retelling of the Old Testament. The entire book is the Old Testament. And so it goes through the entire Old Testament, all these characters like Cain and Abel, these other kind of themes, like the theme of like the wife becoming a whore and this overbearing religious father, and all these sort of themes are found in the Old Testament. It's just retelling of it. And so like we repackage it and we show these things often. I'm not saying that people borrow from the worldview, but I think that it has had an incredible mark on Western society.
So let's go to the events that led to First Kings, right? So nation of Israel delivered out of Egypt, right? Yep. God delivers, they get into Canaan, end of in the wilderness, book of Numbers. Moses gives his goodbye address in Deuteronomy. Yep. Joshua generation enters into Canaan, right? First new generation, all the old one died off. Then they enter into a place with no standing army, really no police force, where the law was the center. And then at some point, I think either in Samuel or whatever, they say, God, give us a king, right? We want a king like the other nations. So then I'm doing the best I can.
So then what happens is you get King Solomon, and King Solomon is told by God, here's what you do and you don't.
Okay. You're fast forwarding again. He likes to skip. They didn't start with King Solomon. When they said, oh, we need a king, it was Saul. King Saul was the king. And Samuel the prophet elected King Saul because he was charismatic and handsome and tall. Like King Saul is the first king, and he's anointed. And then he gets a sign from God, and God tells him, no, you anointed the wrong one, you dummy. Anoint David. And so then he secretly anoints David, and then you have that clash between, Saul wanting to kill David and all that drama. Yeah, the first king Saul, it's not Solomon. Solomon is David's son. So that's like king number 3.
Don't do. Well, the dude does everything he's not supposed to do. He gets like,
95 wives and concubines and
like 1,000. He's huge.
So Solomon acts like his dad and just grabs a whole bunch of women. Like his dad was the same. Like there's nothing special about Solomon except maybe that he got laid more even. I don't know. But Solomon, honestly, like father, like son, he's like David.
Hefner's like, that dude's next level, And so he starts worshiping foreign gods. He starts opening pagan temples and sacrifice.
That's because he takes wives that are of different belief systems. And so that is in the Bible.
Including child sacrifice. And so ultimately what that leads to is 5 generations of this evil demonic family. And you see this slow decline in government. Every generation is a little worse. And this is the progressive lie.
It's not a slow decline. It's a quick decline. So Solomon, I mean, the decline even starts at David. The decline starts at the beginning. Like Saul's pretty awful too. Like the decline starts like from the start of it. Like Saul trying to kill David because like David's like the next in line. Saul commits suicide, by the way. Spoiler alert.
David, has a son that named Absalom that tries to lead a uprising against David and ends up killed. And it's just tragic and terrible. And, Solomon's considered wise, but then Solomon lives in excess. And it's interesting. A lot of people think that Solomon's big sin is not the many women that he gets laid with. And while idolatry is mentioned really high on the list, idolatry is a big deal with Israel. Because I told you how there's a tug and pull of like monotheism, it's a thing. Polytheism, monotheism, polytheism. It goes back and forth constantly all throughout the Old Testament. But one of Solomon's big sins is that he got horses. God commands him not to get horses for his army, which back then would be considered like tanks, like it was a big thing to have an army with horses. And God tells him not to do that. And he does anyway. And so nobody talks about the part where Solomon invests in the army and God goes, no, don't do that.
This is the powerful delusional myth of the progressive lie, and that is that we're good and getting better.
I mean, isn't a man's man the guy that like gets all the tanks? I mean, I just saying.
Totally agree with you.
And the story of the Bible is we're bad and getting worse. And so what you see in First Kings,
that is one view of the Bible, and it's a view of the Bible that I thought was always really, really grim, and not everybody shares that view. So some people say we're bad and we're getting worse, and so you'll see that view in a lot of evangelicals, where they go, oh, end times are coming, man. And it's just going to get worse and worse and worse until God raptures us and the Antichrist is going to come and all this bad stuff's going to happen. It's worse and worse and worse. And people are just going to be sinning all over the place. But there's other views of Revelation that view things differently in different times. And some people think that Revelation is idealism, which is saying like there's like times where there's quote unquote Antichrist. So like an example would be, an Antichrist in history would be something like Napoleon. An Antichrist in history would be something like Hitler. An Antichrist like rises of power that are just incredibly detrimental to humanity. And there's this other view of Revelation instead of like amillennialism, which has taken root in evangelical America. There's other views like idealism that are like, no, these are times in history that it's describing. Either way, Revelation is a head trip. Revelation, you can study it over and over and over again, but let me tell you, cults love at Revelation. I'm just going to say Christian cults love Revelation, and they love the book of Daniel because it's like a mind trip. You can make of it whatever you want. Like it's literally like Revelation reads like shrooms. Like it's all symbolic and it's all scary and woo. And so a lot of cults love those two books. Funny enough, Revelation almost didn't make the canon. Just saying.
King 16 is 5 generations, one to the next, to this corrupt political family. And the truth is, America has been largely dominated by a handful of corrupt political families for generations. And then what happens is it gets to the point where it is so dark, it is so despicable that literally the government is against God, because the conflict is always between.
I mean, the government has been more far right now than it's been in a very long time. And by your definition, in order to be aligned with God is to be right.
Between God and government. God says, I have all authority, and government says we want to remove God and replace God, and we want to be the highest authority. We don't need Jesus to come back. We can set up heaven on earth through policy and taxation, and then the government tries to, in the days of Elijah as our day, take over education, take over entertainment, take over the economy, take over the church. And
yes, heaven forbid we educate people or give them health care. I mean, that's clearly the sign of the devil. How did you get so many subs from being awesome?
So then what happens, it gets so dark, so damnable, so despicable, and God's people are so squeezed and they're so hopeless that God sends Elijah. And the guy's a mountain man. I mean, if you watch the television show alone, he would be the annual winner. He's just a lifestyle guy. And I mean, he wears he wears what he kills. He eats what he kills. He doesn't bring
John the Baptist was similar. There was some.
He came in the spirit and power of the life.
Elijah and Elisha are two different people, but one is the mentor of the other one. Elisha is, I think, number 2. Elijah's number 1. Elijah, I'm pretty sure, is the guy that's really depressed that says, "God, please kill me."
Elijah. They thought it was Elijah.
Right? Yeah, that's right.
Elijah's the guy, like if Rip got saved from Yellowstone and one alone, his name would be Elijah. He's that dude. And so what I love about it is
Elijah was very depressed.
Usually when you think of Christianity, you think of like that soft beta male, gender confused, skinny jeans,
Usually when you think of Christianity, you think of feminine Jesus. It's bad. Danger Man, thank you. $9.99 euros. Is that an E? Euros? I don't know the conversion rate, but I appreciate it. Thank you, dude.
feathered hair with frosted tips. But what happens then is you get a guy like Elijah and you're like, this dude doesn't bring a weapon. He is a weapon. He's a man's man.
Elijah's got a funny story when the priests are worshiping Baal. They go like, prove your God is real. And Elijah's like, yeah, I'm going to prove my God is real. And they're like, yeah, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to get all our priests together and we're going to like worship Baal. And we're going to get this sacrifice to set on fire, just like spontaneously combust. Bolts of fire are going to fall from heaven. Boom. And so like Baal's people are like worshiping Baal, and trigger warning, self-harms in this. And part of their worship is, I guess, that they cut themselves and bleed on the altar and all this stuff, and like they can't get Baal to do anything. And then pounds. Okay, yeah, thank you. And then they get Baal to they're trying to get Baal to do something. So like they're literally cutting themselves and chanting and going around and Elijah just keeps mocking them. They're like, maybe Baal's asleep, you know. And he's funny in that way. Elijah's really funny in that way. But yeah, Elijah is the guy that gets really, really depressed. And God goes like, don't kill yourself. I'll send ravens to feed you.
He's a dude of dudes.
I love that.
He's an outlaw. He's a cowboy. He doesn't fit the mold, and he doesn't come.
He's a cowboy. Look at this Americanization. Like what's really stands out to me about really the problem with American evangelicals, and also particularly this guy, is like we cannot get out of the American lens. It's like no other version of Christianity exists. No other culture exists. It's always the American lens. Like Elijah's a cowboy. No, he wasn't.
Come out of the establishment, he comes out of the woods. And that's what we really need right now. Everybody who's coming out of Bible college, seminary, everybody who's coming out of some sort of established political party is just a neutered, compromised beta male, and we need more Elijahs.
It's a bunch of cowardly eunuchs calling themselves pastors. We're here with Mark Driscoll, New Days, Old Demons. Check out his book, I'm Learning.
Speaking of cowardly eunuchs, give me 1 second. I'll be back on that. Give me 1 second. I'm going to take care of my dog. Okay. I don't know why, but I have to get my mean voice on with my dog the other listen. I'm like, stop it right now. And she's like, fine. And I hate getting the mean voice, man. It makes me sad. So yeah, I know I'm muted. Because you're so smart, you don't respond to trolling. I don't think trolling necessarily is bad unless you're malicious. Like I don't really care. So like it's fine. Appreciate that though. It's kind of you.
Let's see here. Your doggy's making my doggy excited. Probably, right? They set each other off. It's pretty interesting. But back to neutered beta males. Speaking of reading your Bible, which is kind of funny. Jesus talks about eunuchs, which is interesting. Let me see here. Let's see here. I'm looking it up really quick. Boop, 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 boop. Which version? I don't know why I keep defaulting to NIV. That's not my favorite version, but that's fine. All right. So speaking of beta males and eunuchs and whatnot and neutered people, this is Jesus speaking. This is in Matthew 19. He says, "For there are eunuchs who are born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made that way, and there's eunuchs by others that have been made by eunuchs by others, and there are those who choose to live like a eunuch for the sake of the kingdom. The ones who can accept this should accept it. Some are born eunuchs, some have been made eunuchs by others." Interesting. So like there's different versions of it saying the same thing. So I don't know. Jesus wasn't like, some are eunuchs and they're beta males and they need to go and it's demonic. Like, I'm just saying. It's kind of funny. Kind of funny there. Anyway, let me see if there's anything else I'm going to scrub through because I've been going on a very long time here. So let's see. He's really focusing on Elijah. Oh, he's talking about social justice. Oh, please do tell. Okay, let me rewind a little bit on that. Let me see if I can get to the right spot here. I'm looking at the transcript here.
And hero for it, and his name is Jesus.
Once you start drinking from the streams of liberty.
All right, so let's scroll a little bit. Let's see where we're at. 441. Okay, let's go back just a little bit.
Hope and hero for it, and his name is Jesus.
Once you start drinking.
What we tend to do is we have like our news feed and our Bible teaching. I want to put the Bible teaching in front of the news feed, and I don't want to just look at the scriptures. I want to look through the scriptures to the world that we're living in and the demons that we're fighting against and the experiences that we're having. For those who are maybe church hurt,
you know, Thomas Aquinas was one of the Christians that, and you know, it's weird. Like, I know this is going to sound really strange that this is even a thing. But when the Catholic Church, you know, was doing its thing, like the Catholic Church wasn't like enlightened necessarily either. They had a progression through knowledge and stuff like that, and they still have a ways to go. But Thomas Aquinas, you can thank, because Thomas Aquinas opens up and says, hey guys, we can attain knowledge outside of the Bible. This is how. And he makes arguments of how you can attain knowledge outside of the Bible, whether it's philosophical knowledge, whether it's medical knowledge, whether it's natural knowledge. And so Thomas Aquinas actually like puts forth like, guys, it's okay. It's okay to not, you know, act like Bible is the instruction book for everything. You can attain knowledge outside of the Bible. I'm just saying, Mark. Like, catch up with Thomas Aquinas.
And through a rough season, pick up the book, forgive the people that have hurt you, and find God and separate God and the church so that you can get back to God and maybe then find a good church. For those,
was it Thomas Aquinas, like 1300, something like that?
Who are conservative, but they're not Christian, you're halfway there. You need Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Because you don't need to know just what's wrong with the world, but the only hope and hero for it. And
so in order to be a Christian, you need to be a conservative, y'all. Also, in order to be a Christian, or if you are conservative, you're on the highway to Jesus, according to Mark Driscoll, just so you know. So watch out. If you don't plan on loving Jesus, you will soon, according to Mark Driscoll.
what a narrow lens he has. First, he has a very narrow American lens, but he also has a narrow lens of like, I am right and I am politicizing my view of scripture. And then I'm going to act like the government's oppressive. Don't be relying on the government, and act like evangelicals haven't long been trying to take power in the government. Like there's a reason why Mitch McConnell has been sliding in powerful people in our lawmaking. There's whole organizations that are evangelical, that like the family, for instance, and not to be mistaken for Focus on the Family, that's different, but like the family, or I can't think of the other one, but is it Gospel Coalition? I think. Yeah, Christian Coalition or Gospel Coalition, anything that's like those like 700 Club was, and everything adjacent to that was very politically driven. Make no mistake that there's Christians that do not believe in the separation of church and state, and they've got their fingers in everything.
His name is Jesus.
Once you start drinking from,
And what's interesting is evangelical America's like really only like 30% of Christians, but they're like the most powerful percentage of Christians in America right now politically.
from the streams of liberty, you're going to want to find its source.
Jesus says, yeah, I'm going to set you free. His whole thing is freedom.
Yeah, John 10:10, which is what Satan does: lies, to steal, cheat, and destroy. I have come to give life and life more abundantly. What do you have to say to the criticism, Mark, that you're too political when you talk about these things?
Everything is political. Everything is political. And so at the end of the day,
on one end, I agree that it's really hard not to hit political subjects. Like your view on, how even spouses react can be political in some degrees. Your view on any lawmaking is political to some degree. So it's really hard to get completely out of politics. But so you can't get perfectly separated from church and state. But I think there are people that are tolerant and say live and let live, and they want to make a place where it gives freedom for people to allow them to live a lifestyle that they prefer, without treading on their religion or treading on their innate desires and their innate being. And so like this whole live and let live, I mean, he is repeatedly scoffed at the concept of tolerance, which is like tolerance is like the bottom level of getting along with other people. Diversity is appreciating everybody's differences. And that definitely, if he doesn't like tolerance, he's not going to like diversity. That's not going to happen.
if you're saying, well, I don't talk about abortion because it's political. It's not, it's biblical. It's the murder of an innocent human being. And if we're
I agree. It is biblical. It is in norm. It's in numbers. It totally is. Yeah. It's in the Bible. There's an abortion in the Bible.
going to be for social justice, it needs to be for the greatest Holocaust in our lifetime, the most dangerous place on earth. Even a few years ago,
I really hate it when evangelicals compare abortion to the Holocaust. You can say life is valuable and it's important and it's precious. You can say it's a baby, not a fetus, all those sort of argumentations, but to compare it to the Holocaust is insulting to every Jew that like suffered and died. It's just ridiculous. It's the ugly truth is, if you believe it's a life, it's a very early life that has no sense of self and being, really, like we do now. And so it's just not equal. I feel like that's apples and oranges.
Was not walking around without a mask. It was just being in your mother's womb. The leading cause of death was not COVID. Even by the false standards, it was abortion. And so this is what frustrates me.
What frustrates me is that, abortion aside, if God was so focused on infants living, I feel like he wouldn't have infants because you believe everything in the Bible is good and true and wonderful. It couldn't be man trying to make up laws, in the Old Testament and assigning God to it. But, I don't know, God tells the Israelites to kill every man, woman, and child. That would include pregnant women. That would include the unborn that are in the womb. That would include young children who are born. There's that. And you go, oh, well, they were evil. I was like, why can't God do his own smiting then? Why is he having human beings smite for him? That's weird. Like, I'm just saying. That's interesting. Or, you know, if God was like, if, you know, life was so important to God, like, why are there miscarriages? Why are, like, I think it's up to 20%. It could be even higher, that miscarry. Or you go, well, that's because of all the pollution and the evil that's happened and that's caused all these miscarriages. You can make those arguments. It's not true. But like, even look in history, take a walk in the graveyard, go to an old graveyard, especially on the East Coast, go to an old graveyard where there's really old gravestones, 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, like count the infant deaths, even in Victorian era, count the infant deaths. How many infant deaths are there? They're not aborted deaths. These are just infant deaths. The sad truth is that young beings die all the time. And it doesn't mean that, like, yay, you know, like, I'm not Cheshire that wants to chase 3-year-olds with a hanger. But I'm saying, like, it's interesting. Like, there's this whole, oh my gosh, the unborn. But in my experience, like, oh my gosh, the unborn, the same people that are like anti-abortion, can you sign this petition at church, are the same people that told me when I had a miscarriage, don't worry, you'll have another one. It's no big deal.
Everything is political. Truth is political. Life is political. Freedom is political. Church being open is political. And if you read the story of Elijah, every day it's a head-on collision between the prophet and the government. Same with John the Baptizer. Same with Jesus Christ. They crucified Jesus because he was an offense to the authorities in the Roman government. Jesus died because he picked a fight with the political. So those who quote Romans 13 are like, obey the government. It's written by a dude who did some of his best work from prison. That's right. Started a number of...
You know, I don't even think Jesus was focused on the government. He said, render unto Caesar that is Caesar's. He just didn't even care. But Jesus did care about those in power and religion. He was harshest to the Pharisees. I don't think the Pharisees equate as government. The Pharisees equate as religious leadership and hypocrisy within that religious leadership. He was nicer to Pilate than he was to Herod. He was nicer to Pilate than he was to the Pharisees.
Riots. And if you look at Elijah and you look at all the prophets and you look at Daniel and you look at Joseph,
you go, why? What do you mean he's nicer to Pilate? Wait a minute. What do you mean? Well, he would answer Pilate. He at least answered Pilate. He wouldn't answer. He wouldn't answer the Jewish leader.
Usually the government hates them and God loves them, and they're a sledgehammer for justice.
Look at the midwives. We don't know if they're Egyptian or Hebrew in Exodus 2 or 3.
It's civil disobedience.
Yeah, I think it's Exodus 2. It's the first act of civil disobedience, and it said, and it pleased God.
Yeah.
And I think they're Egyptian. I know it's debated, but it's actually even more powerful if they're Egyptian. They said, no, we're not going to kill the firstborn.
Well, because government speaks, but above government is God.
Yes.
And so they say this in Acts when they tell the early disciples, don't preach Jesus. They're like, we have to obey God, not government. And so I will obey the government until it disobeys God, and then I will appear to the higher authority, because government doesn't have innate authority. It has derivative authority that comes from God. Our whole nation is founded on that principle.
And
well, okay. So but his lens is just the conservative American lens and very white centric. So there's that too. So that's Mark Driscoll. And so I just thought it was interesting that Unirach glommed onto Mark Driscoll because he's icky. That's the intellectual word for that, icky. Anyway, I've been going on a really long time, and I'm about done, and I just need to chill, and Sally needs a walk. And so we're going to go soon. So I'm going to play some outro music. Thank you guys for coming. If you've never been here before, I talk about all sorts of subjects. Sometimes it's criticism. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's people hanging out and discussing things. My favorite are actually conversations about like how people think and why they are the way they are. And so those are my favorite conversations. But I am known for being a detractor for Steve McRae, folks like that. But I enjoy everybody popping in here.
have fun at Tim McGraw. I love Tim McGraw. I love Tim McGraw. All right. So I'm gonna play some outro music. Thank you guys for showing up. Thank you for enduring my opinions, which are not very popular amongst YouTube Christians. I find that a lot of YouTube Christians, particularly, they don't like me very much. I've been told I'm worse than an atheist. I'm worse because I'm a heretic. But I'll tell you this: there's quite a lot of flavors of Christianity. It's just that the loudest ones, unfortunately, are some of the more wildly willing to infringe upon your rights while saying don't tread on me, which is fascinating. Freedom for them, but not for you. So anyway, find a better pastor to glom on to, unirach. I can think of a few. Rob Bell is even better. Like I get bashed for liking Rob Bell. But there are other people that you can enjoy and appreciate that aren't just dicks like him, even conservative ones. I'm trying to think of a conservative pastor that's not a dick. I'm just really kind of struggling for some reason. I mean, he's sort of a dick, but it's if you want to learn a lot, and it's through a lens of Thomas Aquinas, but with Reformed theology. So it's Calvinism. But R.C. Sproul's one of the better ones. I know I'm gonna get boo because of Trey Jadlow and other atheists that watch my channel. But there are people that are smarter than Driscoll and are better at applying Christian principles to daily living. And so I like Derek Webb. I think he sings about some of the more uncomfortable things, and he got his music pulled from Christian shelves quite early, back when we used to actually care about bookstores and Christian bookstores, because Derek Webb was really okay with calling out some of the problematic behaviors in evangelical Christianity, and so that was always kind of interesting. So it's good to see you all. Nighty night. And I'll just play you guys out with some more Derek Webb. If that blocks me from Canada, because I know I can play it here in the US, but sometimes Canada blocks me for this. I apologize. But you can use a VPN to watch if you want. I'm probably going to get canceled for saying that, because who knows? YouTube's been so weird lately. The rules have been so weird. Have a good night, y'all.
Poverty is so hard to see when it's only on your TV or 20 miles across town, where we're all living so good that we moved out of Jesus' neighborhood, where he's hungry and not feeling so good from going through our trash. He says more than just your cash and coin. I want your time, I want your voice, I want the things you just can't give me. So what must we do? Here in the West we wanna follow you. We speak the language and we keep all the rules, even a few we made up. Come on and follow me. But sell your house, sell your SUV, sell your stock, sell your security, and give it to the poor. Well, what is this? Hey, what's the deal? I don't sleep around and I don't steal, but I want the things you just can't give me. I want the things you just can't give me. Because what you do to the least of these, my brothers, you have done it to me. Because I want the things you just can't give me. I want the things you just can't give me.